Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to do a full album review today, which is where we explore a full album track by track, exploring each song in isolation and what it brings to the larger artwork. Today we're going to be looking at the 2007 album from the Receiving End of Sirens called The Earth Sings Mi Fa Mi. I think we've listened to Receiving End of Sirens before, but I don't think it was this album. The name seems familiar. Between the Heart and a Synapse, that album art looks familiar too. That was a couple years earlier than this one. Also, this looks like their latest album. Yeah, it looks like they put out a little 2-song EP in 2012, but this was it. They had a 2005 and a 2007 album, and that was it. So, let's see what the Receiving End of Sirens is bringing to the table. Today we're going to kick it off with the track Swallow People Whole. Very nice mix of interesting rhythmic ideas with almost an electronic direction. Even the vocals kind of sound digitized. Yeah, it's the backing track that gives it that digital edge. The main vocal track is really well done. The cool thing is, I don't think there's anything electronic in here though. Oh, you know what? There is a keyboard in here, I bet. But everything else, we have an electric bass, electric guitar. Yeah, the heavy reverb on, I think, the guitar, creating this rhythmic pulse in the same pitch. Yeah, I love this new projection in the vocals. Here we go, the build up. Oh, even that kind of lacked the punch though. Like, I do think this is supposed to be the peak, but it doesn't feel full. That little rundown on the final sing, also transferring it into like a sang, kind of getting an A in there instead of the I. I'm kind of sweating a little bit because I really like that. This is going into the next track. Yeah, it defied my expectations a little bit. I still was hoping at some point that it would hit the peak, and it never really did. And I'm not sure what's up with that. I'm kind of curious if it's maybe just a production thing, because I was trying to think of the composition, and I do think there is growth. Not necessarily going into the bridge, but coming out of the bridge into the final moments when we began having the dual vocal parts. That, I think, is the peak. It's the climax of the song. It just never feels that way, even if I think compositionally it is. And I just wonder if that's, mid-2000s production, especially in this type of music, which is... it's adjacent to post-hardcore. I hear post-hardcore in some of the guitar work. Not necessarily the guitar sound. The vocals 100% are post-hardcore. They have that... I don't know what it is. I wish I knew how to describe it. Like, it's just one of those things when I hear it, I'm like, yeah, this dude's singing like his inspirations come from... emo and post-hardcore, and there's a lot of crossover in the vocalage between those two, the vocal traits between those two styles. But like it's also not post-hardcore in a lot of ways. We're going to get into this as I get away from vague genre name dropping and get into specifics, but there's a lot in here that I am right at home with. Stuff that I wish I had discovered in 2007 when it came out, because I would have been all over it just as much as I am today. If we were doing a single song review reaction, I would probably check this album out immediately just based off of this one track, and I have the fortune of being able to listen to the whole album right here and get paid to do so. So I'm kind of down for that. I think that's awesome. It's a nice little perk of the job sometimes. I get something that just really clicks for me. Now, granted, there's also 11 more songs on this album. Maybe it doesn't stay like this, but this opening track has me pulled in immediately. But like I was saying, it just goes in, it never quite hits that peak of what I want, but I don't think it's composition. I think it's energy, which is more of a production thing in this case. But it is kind of clear, too. There's a little bit of muddiness in places, especially with low-end tones. But it isn't overly compressed like a lot of post-hardcore was in the mid-2000s either. So it's really interesting where, like I said, there's parts of it where I'm like, okay, this totally makes sense. This is of this era, of this genre. But then there's the other half of the song. I'm like, I don't think I've ever heard anything like this paired with what is familiar to me. And that's really exciting in and of itself. Um, Although it does sort of remind me of groups like Select Start, which kind of took the emo side of music and paired it with electronic instruments or electronic sounds in the guitar work, digitization of the vocals, creating that overly produced vocal sound, which we saw here on the backing vocals. So it's not like this is completely foreign to me, but it still does some things I don't expect, and that's really neat. Now, while we're on the topic of production, I want to praise some stuff here. Dude, the instrument choices, and I think more importantly, the instrument timbre choices, is really interesting on this. A lot of the instruments sound electronic. We have a very synthy sounding guitar in here. We have heavy reverb on it just to add even more digital element to it. The bass is fuzzy and punchy. The drums, I think, might even be MIDI triggering in order to get some of their sounds in there as well. Although it could just be post-production entirely, as they're still, I think, at the heart of it, sounds like a drum kit, not an electronic. Oh, it could have gone with an electronic drum kit too. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, so there's the chance of that as well. And then I do think there is a keyboard in here that is doing some of the more synthy movements, including panning, which is probably done in post too, but pitch modulation, granularity of pitch, stuff like that. But it all creates something that feels rock-ish at its core, but very electronic on the surface. And I think it's a wonderful collection of sounds here that really fits overall the mood of this entire track. Because this is not really a song that's too tied up on atmosphere. And post-hardcore kind of goes in two ways. There's the more riffier side, and then there's the more atmospheric side. And I think that's where this one tends to sit. If you asked me to hum any of the guitar or piano or keyboard or bass riffs, licks, I couldn't do it. Nothing really stood out to me. The vocal melody, I think, was the only thing in here that was melodious and catchy. And yeah, it does that well. I would like another thing. I'm a big fan of melody and counterpoint, but honestly, the vocals do such a great job at crafting something catchy and melodious that I don't really feel like there's an empty pocket, a need for more. It's just my general like for counterpoint that has me kind of wishing they had gone in that direction, but they do that as well. Towards the end of the track, having the two vocals do call and response, overlaid lines. We have counterpoint followed by passing of the baton. We have overlapping on the passing of the baton. It's just really great stuff at the end of the track, and I melted. Y'all know how much I love multiple vocal lines. And they absolutely killed it, especially with the harmonies that came up through the counterpoint. So, yeah, I mean, it's just so good. But, back on the instruments, again, there's nothing in here that really stands out to me. Nothing that I find is quite memorable. But that doesn't mean that the instruments are not doing anything of import or even interest. There is so much going on with the instruments here, and it kind of becomes a point where I find it difficult to piece out what everything is doing. There is a very large, greater than the sum of its parts thing going on, where everything is kind of spacious. I don't really think we had any instrument just holding out chords. They were all sort of bouncing around, having moving ideas. they were all interplaying too, where like one person would play this line and it has these notes and these spaces, and another person would come in and they would play between the spaces, and then another one would come in and they would play these larger ideas. If everybody's working with quarter notes and half notes, or sorry, quarter notes and eighth notes, maybe they're working with half notes or quarter note triplets, just something that is a bit larger and wider than what everyone else is doing. And so it creates these new pockets that recontextualizes what the other two lines are doing, and it just all comes together into the atmosphere of the track. It's the way that it feels, the way that it sounds. There's just constant noise bouncing all over the place in this track. It's really gorgeous. And like I said, there's so much going on. I had a real tough time breaking it all apart. I'm not going to be able to sit here and say, oh, this specific guitar line was awesome, because, well, it doesn't really happen often, but I didn't really hear the guitar line. I heard the song. I really jammed with this one, but it was also a lot easier for me to take it in as a whole idea. And that whole idea, to me, ends up being vastness, larger than life. I didn't really catch any human emotion. There was a little bit of... Yeah, no, not even that. Yeah, the song just feels big. I don't really feel anything that was happy or sad, mad, victorious, nothing like that. No, human feelings. Simple feelings, I guess you could say. But the song just felt vast, almost like it wanted to be space rock, but aired just on the other side of the line, allowing it to retain some of the feelings of expansiveness without going into that stereotypical space rock chord progression, or key even. And so it retained more of the rock feeling, standard rock, but felt large. And that's really the whole song to me. It's one vocalist against the vastness of space. I really hope the lyrics lean into that in any way possible, but it's such a vague concept that I picked out. I think it's going to be either too easy to parrot or it's not going to show up at all. It does make me... it puts me in the mindset, though, that I'm going to have to pay a little bit more attention moving forward to individual ideas and force the separation if they continue to write like this. Primarily because I am interested in what the individual instruments are doing, even if it isn't the way that my brain wants to listen to this music. Now, we do have the verse and the chorus, and then the verse and the chorus, but then we have the bridge, and this kind of dips things down. I just mentioned that there weren't really anything that any instrument that played chords on this, but the bridge is certainly the exception to that. We create a little bit of a sound floor here, at the expense, I think, of the sound ceiling. I mentioned that the bridge felt a bit empty. It was missing a fullness to it. I think that this really allowed, when we came back to the chorus and implemented all of these moving ideas, for that to feel cluttered and full. Again, it did have a sense of growth from it, even if it wasn't quite the impact I had been waiting for with what I thought was a build-up across this track. But we do have this tension, this not even rising energy, just static energy here in the bridge. And of course it does build up with a chord rise and a drum fill at the end to take us into the outro, which, as I already mentioned, was just phenomenal. We had the dual vocals here going at the same time. We eventually separated them out to call and response. The call and response started to bleed together as the end of one line would continue to play through the beginning of the next, or the next line might start a couple of beats early while the first line is still going. And we get those cool little overlaps at the beginnings and ends of bars. Just a real big way to finish the song up. And again, it's a nice peak as well, at least compositionally. I wish I had more to add to this, but I don't. So we're going to move on to lyrics, and then we're going to check out the next track. And like I said, now that I know what type of music I've been introduced to here, I'm going to try to get to that mindset where I can dive into this more intricate style of music that Swallow People Whole was. So, lyrics. I think I got a little lucky with this one. It kind of is about vastness, but in a different kind of way than I was ever expecting. It talks about the way that people use and consume other people. The idea of swallowing people whole, absorbing who they are, what they are, and their energy for your own needs and wants. Mentions multiple times that within me is a gaping hole. No one, nothing can fill this empty space, but I fell in love with this empty place. So there's a part of me that I just need to fill. It consumes my every waking moment. And so he fills it with people. The chorus says, I can say it, but it won't mean a thing because I know you'll fall for each and every pretty word that I sing. It's about manipulating people. It doesn't really matter if he tells them the truth or not. He's got charisma to spare. The second verse maybe, says, spirits spin me around once more. Sin if you sing the overture that lulls me back to sleep. I swear I'm yours to keep, consumed with consuming. Soon I'll swallow people whole. I'll have back what strangers stole. If I can't find my happiness, I'll soon devour yours. I'll sing your weary head to rest with my overture. The idea of trying to make yourself feel whole through your relationships, through other people. And, worst case scenario, if you can't, you'll drag them down to your misery. That's the entire song. Now, I mentioned that my interpretation of it is that this is what people do, not necessarily our narrator. And it's because the turn at the end of the track, the bridge, no, not the bridge. The first time that we have the dual vocals, the background vocal says we lose ourselves once more, while the primary vocalist says, for it I fell so fast and so hard. So the whole song has been about deceiving people, but now the narrator has been deceived. And we come to the final chorus, and there's a twist on it. It's no longer that I could say it and it won't mean anything, but it's that you could say it and it won't mean anything, because you know that all fall for each and every pretty word you sing. Because I need to have this hole filled within me, I'm willing to believe people when they say they just want to help, they just want to be around me, they like me for who I am. But really, they're no different than me, having a hole within them that they need to fill as well. And so we all deceive each other in hopes of feeling whole. But if we're all stealing energy from other people, we're all trying to steal energy from someone else, it's zero sum and we all lose. What a sad song. I was not expecting that given the music. Dang. Alright, well, that's how we're kicking this off. That's a good start to this album. I don't know how to pronounce this next song. Oubliette. And then in parentheses it says disappear. I don't know. I'm going to have to type that into Translate later and get a pronunciation on that. But let's dive into it. We still have a couple seconds left on this. Like I said, I think this song's going to transition into the next. I watched you steal away. Ooh. polyrhythm. Yeah, see, this one's very compressed. This feels like what I expect from mid-2000s post-hardcore. Ooh, a little bit of a different take on this verse. Yeah, very texture-based. So good. Is that just like a sub-bass electronic sound there that gave that low rumble coming into this outro? I think that's going to transition as well. Alright, so this is a very straightforward post-hardcore track. Lots of chord work in both the verse and the chorus. We have a little bit of riffage going on in that first verse and some texture-based atmospheric stuff in the second verse. But it's primarily about creating a good groove from the bass and drums, chords from the guitars, and then your melody really delivering the meat, what the audience is supposed to be keying into for majority of the track. And this group doubles down on that, constantly having multiple vocalists, or at least multiple vocal tracks. and it is something that I'm really loving. Some of my favorite bands who do this typically utilize it as a punctuating point of a song, to do it coming up to a high point, maybe just in the bridge, maybe on just the final chorus. Very similar to how pop stars will put some ad-libbed vocalizations on the final chorus. It's a way to up the ante at the end. And what I really love here is that in both of these, well, no, the first track we didn't have it as much. It was something we used at the end to elevate it. But here in this track, it's used throughout the entire thing. It's just a de facto state of the song is to have multiple vocal tracks. And I'm totally here for it. It's so good. It is. This does feel of its time, though, where I thought that the first track was a bit of an interesting direction to go, starting from a very clear foundation and moving in a different direction than expected. This is 100% what I would expect for a mid-2000s post-hardcore track, as far as structure, instrumental sounds, vocal timbre, writing even. Many of the riffs and drum parts feel what I would expect, and even the production being quite a bit more compressed than the first track was, and no matter really how far I turned it up, it never quite felt right. It always felt a little muffled, and it's wild. I've listened to so many albums like this, and some albums I just can't imagine sounding any other way. But when I hear something new, my first thought is, dang, I wish this had a little bit more clarity at the top. And yeah, it's a product of its time. As much as I find this sound to be home, it is not perfect, and I would love to hear a remaster with a little bit more. Well, no, you can't add information back into a song, can you? We would have to have found well, that would assume that they didn't record it with that heavy compression on the guitars too, but you'd have to find something that was pre-produced to have more of that information, because compression removes detail from the sound waves, and so you can't put that back unless you have the original where it was still there, if it was even there to begin with. Yeah, it's just, I would love one with just a little less compression to it. But whatever, that's neither here nor there. I quite enjoyed this song. You may have been able to judge from a few of my body movements that I was able to correctly identify upcoming rhythmic changes and anticipate them and move along with them. This is, I don't want to call it by the books, but it is very much what I expect when I hear a post-hardcore song. And so there's nothing in here that really blows my mind, but it is a solid track nonetheless. Now, interestingly, I'm looking at the plays on this album. Many are in the 100,000 range, this one included, at 196. This is the highest of the lower played songs, but the one we just listened to had 300,000. It was also quite a bit more diverse, a little bit more progressive even. We have one on here that's almost 600,000. We have one that's about 200,000. I wonder if these three tracks that deviate from the core graph are maybe more progressive, all of them, whereas some of the lesser played ones are a bit more standard fare for the style and maybe just didn't take off as well. Regardless, I'm really looking forward to track 5, as it is the most played, most popular song on here. They only have 19,000 monthly listeners, which seems very low to me. Receiving End of Sirens is a band that I remember from high school. I had people who listened to them. Why I never got around to it, I don't know. I listened to CDs back then, and CDs were expensive. It wasn't like streaming. And I don't recall anybody having the CD. Maybe they went and saw them live? Maybe it was on Fuse. They watched music videos on Fuse. I don't know. But this is a band that I've heard of before, and I knew they were post-hardcore before going into this. Track 1 really surprised me, but this is what I was expecting from them given what I remembered. But why didn't I ever listen to this? Although, to be fair, there's a lot of music that I had friends who listened to that I distinctly remember saying, no, that sounds dumb, and then really enjoying it later on in life. So it could have just been one of those things where I was a stupid teenager and I was like, oh, the name sounds dumb, so no one would like the band. Or, it was one of my friends whose music I typically didn't get along with, so I just ignored it for guilty by association, right? Teenagers are dumb. Uh, wow, that could be taken out of context. Just a wide blanket statement like that, huh? I guess on the positive side of that, we were all teenagers at one point. I'm insulting myself a bit. Um, but yeah, I do want to talk about one thing in here that stood out to me. Because, like I said, a lot of this is just chord work, atmosphere, and groove. Nothing that I think really stands out. But there was a choice that I really liked. The second verse. The first verse had a riff to it. Not something that I could recite back. Again, not really memorable on riffs. Just enough to create the texture and atmosphere that they're going for without being boring. Verse 2, though, ditches the riff entirely, focusing on a rhythmic display of chords and electronic textures, creating a lot of space. I mentioned that it's rhythmic display of chords. You're not just holding a chord out. You might play a couple of notes and then have empty space before the next bar where you might play a few more notes. And all that empty space is what allowed them to introduce all of the keyboard work in here, the synths, the electronic sounds, and really focusing on texture over everything else. I don't necessarily know what the intent was here. I'm curious if this wasn't just pure experimentation. I'm trying to think back to what the landscape was for this type of music in the mid 2000s and if electronic music had really started to work their way in. I had mentioned Select Start earlier in the video, and I want to say that they were a hair bit after this. The end of the 2000s, I think, is where we started to see a strong meshing of electronic and this more palatable, mainstream-friendly post-hardcore stuff. You've noticed there's no harsh vocals in here. There's no screechy dyads. This is a very tame style of post-hardcore that feels closer to like pop emo. Or pop rock with just a little bit more grit to it. And electronic music working into this did happen around this time, but this could have been before their time. No, not that. It could have been before the shift really happened. I think that's what I want to say there. So this could have been a bit more influential, and what feels sort of commonplace today wasn't so at the time. I'm not sure about the context, though. Y'all will have to let me know what the landscape looked like for this type of collaboration. But again, I don't really know what they were going for with it other than just experimentation. I don't think the second verse does anything narratively that I think adds to the song, but it is neat that they went for that direction to completely change things up, not just compositionally, but in the entire approach, the entire intention for the section is to get away from the guitars and have a heavy focus on cool synthy sounds, and to create space for that, to have the guitars get out of the way, only play a little bit and make room for the rhythmic textures of the synth. And we never hear anything like it again. It's a very isolated section. It feels very disjointed to everything else, but the fact that verse 1, verse 2, and the bridge are all wildly different kind of creates this consistency through the inconsistency. What might have been a little bit off-putting in the second verse, if not for the fact that I just really liked the sound they were going for, definitely would have felt a bit more commonplace in retrospect by the time we got to the bridge and found out that every time we hit the chorus, we did something different afterwards. In a sense, the structure for this song could be A, B, C, B, D, B. Just constantly returning back to that chorus, but going somewhere new, linear style, afterwards. And so that's where I sit on this track. It's very cool. I enjoy it, but there really isn't a lot more to dive into, I don't think. And we've had this problem in the past when it comes to emo and post-hardcore music, stuff that I'm a lot more familiar with than, albeit not so limited anymore, but still my limited knowledge of death metal and black metal and basically just metal in general, is I can still approach some of this stuff with a type of pure curiosity that I find difficult with stuff like this. It might be, or it might not be, that there isn't more depth to it. I'm just not used to looking for that extra depth. I have spent 20-ish years listening to this style of music purely casual. I really don't do any sort of critical listening when I listen to music like this. And we have so little of it on the channel too, it's really tough to just override that. And so I'm curious if maybe there is depth to it and I'm just having a hard time getting into that mode. But from what I can tell, from what I'm picking up, again, it's a lot of chords, a lot of textures, and phenomenally catchy vocals. And to me, that adds up to a good time. Maybe there is some emotional depth. Maybe there's some storytelling in here I'm missing. Actually, that's probably fair. Some of my favorite songs in this style of music, I never really figured out the depth to them that would have made them my favorite until, 50, 100 times listening through it and something clicks. I'm like, oh, no way. That lines up so good. It adds so much. So, I don't know. We'll continue on with this. I'm not going to stop the album review halfway just because I feel like it's not as deep as others. Maybe just the fact that I'm enjoying it so much is enough for the person who requested it. I don't know. Let's hit some lyrics on this, see what's going on with Disappear. Alright. This song is... I don't know. It talks about somebody who steals man's best years away. It talks about watching tempters try to satisfy with the sweet taste of wasted time of people who have wasted their time in this endeavor, possibly trying to be in a relationship with this person. It talks about being led out to the wayside to be left and forgotten. It says that I've seen men beg and plead with moving lips and bended knee just to have you back. So there's this person that our narrator is wary of. Has seen them break the hearts of many, but they also want to take their shot at this. It says the chorus, this is something that we see repeatedly throughout this track. Don't let me disappear, don't let me fall apart, just don't let me go, don't let me fade away. I don't know. The only way I think I can read this in something that makes sense to me narratively is if this is a perspective shift to the heartbreaker. And they're not necessarily vindictive, they just want to be remembered, and they feel like they aren't in some of these relationships, so they end them. But it feels very weird to shift the perspective just for a few lines. So I have to read that as the narrator that we've been seeing this whole time, and I'm not sure how that relates to anything else in this track. I do like, though, how the idea is that each verse and even the bridge is a different instance. It feels like somebody else that was burned by this person. And so the consistently moving forward element in the music, how each of the verses and the bridge all are different sets entirely musically, I think lines up with that as well. It's a very cool parallel being drawn there. All right. Push forward. We're going to check out the next trap called The Crop and the Pest. After this, I think we check out the longest song on the album. almost. And then we'll probably start doing 2 tracks at a time, and probably after that 7-minute song, I'm also going to look at some extra info. The Wikipedia and probably the Genius annotation on the band and the album and whatever other information I can find about them, and kind of get a better idea of who they are outside of just their musical writing. So let's dive into The Crop and The Pest. Oh, I forgot to talk about that extended electronic outro. I have no understanding for it other than just a transition, and it's kind of cool. I like the falsetto layered against the chest vocal. Yeah, I knew we were gonna have that big jump up. Bit of a slower moving verse on this one. Oh, over here actually. That was actually a sound that was introduced at the post-chorus. I thought it was going to take us into the next verse, but it didn't, but it did come back. Is the whole chorus just a single verse? Or a single chord? Very bright and twinkling. I like this section. Very gorgeous. We have more chordal movement this time around. Oh, I jumped the gun. We're back to the single chord. So it's okay, it's not just on the back half. And it's going to transition again, I'd wager. All right. Yeah, this is it's a nice little moment of contrast. We have a slower, more spacious track here. I wouldn't necessarily call this a ballad, but it does lean closer to that than either of the previous two songs. Oh, yeah, okay. I was going to say there's really not much going on here. It's more of the same. But no, we have something I meant to touch on with the first track is a dual layering that we have with a very chest voice for the primary focus and then a head voice or a falsetto in the background that kind of sits under the core vocal track, and it widens it out a little bit, but I think there's also a bit of overproduction on it that gives it more of a digital edge to it. And the two of these combined, something that feels a bit more natural and one that feels a bit more digital, works really well. I like the way that they sound together, and we got to hear more of that on this track. The chorus. The chorus is kind of wild. We have in the first half of it a bit of movement, primarily from our left guitar and the bass. As far as chord, it's chordal movement. We kind of boom, 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 boom. A little bit of a moving idea, not too many chords. I can't sing polyphonically, so you just have to accept that I sang one note at a time and that there are actually chords going on there. But a little bit of movement there. But on the back half, it's that same rhythm with just one chord. At the end of the first bar, there is a 2-note dip before coming back up, which feels very weird because it feels like it is moving in the direction for the next note that would add tension to the progression, and instead it jumps back up to where we were at. It feels wildly unexpected. Even by the fifth time I had heard this idea, I was still like, oh, geez, it feels so weird to listen to. These notes are pointing towards the next one down. It sounds like we're going to a fifth down or something like that. I was like, okay, that's where we're going. And then we never do. We jump back up to the initial one. And it's just such an awkward movement. But I mean, maybe it makes sense. We hit the lyrics and the chorus is about feeling awkward or doing the unexpected. I don't know. But yeah, so like half the chorus though is just one chord, no movement at all. Where we had quite a bit of movement just before that, and it's just ebb and flow of contrast and static, contrast and static. I'm curious if that's going to factor into anything. We had a ton of good multiple vocal work on here again, with 60% of the songs we've listened to so far heavily utilizing dual vocals. I'm thinking that this is going to be more of the norm, less of the single vocal stuff that we saw in track 1. I hope that's how it is going forward because I really love it. The verse played around with texture again, more digital sounds. We heard more of them in the outro as well. We also had that rising and falling pitch shifted thing that slid into the higher note and then slid back down to the lower note. It was in the first post chorus and then showed up on the back half of the verse. I pointed it out. It was off on the right. Not a real big fan of the sounds, but it is neat hearing them continue to experiment with timbre in their music. Now, I think the big thing that I want to touch on here, though, is the bridge. The last, 7 minutes, 8 minutes of this album have primarily been chordal based. A far cry from the more densely layered writing that we saw on the opening track that really surprised me, where we had multiple moving lines all sort of filling in each other's spaces. That's what we got in the bridge here. I mentioned that it felt kind of twinkling, like looking up into the sky at night and seeing these blips of light amongst the black. That's exactly what this moment feels like to me, and I really appreciate it for that. I wish we could hear more of it because I think they're really good at writing it, But I also enjoy the contrast here, moving from the chord and texture heavy writing to the more melodic and layered writing here. And I think that having so much music that's chordal based and then moving to something atmospheric and light and dexterous in this moment really made it stand out quite a bit. It was a nice bit of callback to a majority of the writing from the opening track in a way that I think elevated this one as well. It's called The Crop and the Pest. And well, I'm sure we'll find some sort of elements of levity in the lyrics given the feeling that we had in this section here. And it's not just the writing either, it's the timbres used. Everything was very bright, higher pitched, shorter sounds. And it all comes together in a rhythmic delivery, multiple layers of rhythms. I really like it. And here's the other thing too, is there isn't a lot of room to write like this with the dual vocal stuff elsewhere, because then you're working with 2 melodic or 3 melodic style instruments and then 1 to 2 melodies, and things can get very complex. I'm not saying that Receiving End of Sirens couldn't write a multi-melody part like that, but the more melodies that you put together, the tougher it becomes to write something that doesn't sound like cacophonous noise. And so it's usually better to err on the side of simplicity and try to achieve what you can with efficiency over complexity. And I think that they do a great job of knowing when they can go more complex and when they should simplify things down a little bit for maximum effectiveness. Alright, with all that said, let's check out some lyrics on this and then dive into one of the longer tracks on the album. Alright, lyrically this song is exactly what the title says. It's about a crop, something that brings sustenance and life and positivity, and the pest who is going to devour it and destroy the crop. It's a parasitic relationship here. And so we have our narrator, who is the pest, and speaks sweet nothings to the crop. Come away with me, you perfect shell. I will treat you so well. I'll take you up from this hell, my gracious host. As the song continues on, though, we eventually find harsher and harsher words, beginning to see the reality of it. He says, your pleasures are all mine, to twist and turn around in figure eights and out of place. It begins to speak negatively of itself. I'm the fervor of the fever you can't sweat. I'm the garment stuck to your skin, drenched and dripping wet. He says at one point that I'm a pestilent scab that you'll never see. At the very end, asking, what have I become? Taking away from the surface level read of it and turning it into the metaphor. I am not a real pest to a crop. I'm a terrible person. Why am I like this? That's just how the song ends. And so I'm picking up on some themes here. We're only 3 tracks in, and so far they've all been about relationships. We have concepts of self-loathing in here, concepts of heartbreak and being mad at another person, and people taking advantage of others. They're all rather negative. For being post-hardcore music, the lyrics are quite emo, and it makes me wonder if I maybe should have brought out emo Bryan for this one. But I don't have time for that right now. So we're going to continue on with this, pushing into our next track, which is called The Salesman, the husband, the lover. Let's dive in, see what they're doing with one of their longer tracks. Sort of a dreamlike movement. A hazy kind of atmosphere, muffled, like mist, a silhouette appearing through.
Large enough to tear apart, split evenly in two. Mom and Dad had a rocky start, too much head, too little heart. Soon one turned into two, 1, 2. Dirty hands made separate beds, and folded sheets in which they slept. Oh, what's a boy to do? What's a boy to do? When Daddy finds the dollar whores and liquor stores can offer more than his family.
The falsetto on that first jump, and then to keep stacking it higher with chest after that and mixed. Very cool.
Shameful sea of soul. Then one day Daddy walked away from his wife and child they had made. It must have been too much. It must have been too much. Mommy tried her best to pay the bills so that her son could stay.
Little Mars Volta-esque with that heavy wavy guitar tone. Oh, a bit of a counterpoint over here on the keyboard. Yeah, bringing the energy back down.
Chord ordered visits meant weekends with his dad, where he learned his share of lessons and how to drink like his old man. Back home, his mother packed her bags and the dreams that she watched.
Love the bass tone on this. Yeah, very cool. So that's the second time we've built something up just to release it. Bring it back down to this atmospheric, reverb-drenched guitar work. Punching right out of that back to full volume. All the dexterity on the vocals here. think we had 3 vocal lines there, 1 harmonizing and 2 counterpoint. The constant moving underneath with the longer violin melodies on top. A bit of a somber ending here. There's still a sound left over to carry us into the next. I think this is my favorite so far, which kind of feels weird because it is the least played one of this first third that we've checked out so far. I love the flow of this track. The highs and the lows, bringing up all this energy, not to abruptly turn into something lesser, but to allow it to dissipate sort of naturally. We don't have a piecewise removal to have a gradual reduction of energy, but it doesn't just stop either and then go into something quieter. There is a little bit of dispersal of energy there at the end of them, and then we get these hazy atmospheres, what we heard in the beginning of this track. I really love this because it makes each of the groups, the verse chorus, and then the bridge chorus, all feel like vignettes, which might be how it's supposed to be understood. The song is called The Salesman, The Husband, The Lover. The title is in 3 parts, and we have 3 distinct sections to this song that are all broken up with 30 seconds or so of hazy atmosphere. It ends up working really well, where the energy resets allow us to build back into something so that it never quite feels like the highs are stagnant in any way. And I really love the highs. I'm glad that they continue to feel punchy and impactful throughout this entire track, especially there at the very end when I thought coming back to this final chorus was not going to hit as well, and it still worked. Primarily, I think, because they added that extra vocal line in there. The one that harmonized the backing vocal. Yeah, it just works so well. My attention was definitely kept throughout this whole song, despite the very clear direction it's going in. Atmosphere, energy buildup. Atmosphere, energy buildup. They don't really deviate from that at all, but I think that the reliability of the song to do what I expect it to makes it feel comfortable in a way that I'm kind of hoping they undercut with the lyrics. Now, speaking of atmosphere, this I think is the 3rd song in a row that I've talked about texture. Utilizing new timbres in order to create specific tones or feelings or atmospheres for each of the tracks. It's what's really separating them. The core rock band sound, the way that the vocals are delivered and layered, the way that the melodies are written and the chord progressions are written. It gets very similar-ish, but they have found ways to make each of the songs very unique by utilizing different tones and textures, primarily from the digital side of things, in order to craft unique atmospheres in each of these tracks. And this one's no different. This one gives us that really hazy interlude that kicks the track off and that we visit after each of our peaks. And it's interesting. I don't know if it's going to keep my interest throughout the entire album. Now, 12 songs, an hour, give or take, of music. It's a lot of time to keep doing new things, but maybe they have the chops for it. Speaking of chops, I had mentioned, I think in the last analysis section, that I wanted more layers, more counterpoint, and that I didn't know if they had the chops for it, but they hadn't showcased it yet. Here we go. The chorus to this has two dueling vocal lines, both doing their own things, creating harmonies, but their own melodies. And we also have off on the left the organish kind of sounding keyboard or synth patch that is creating another melody. That kind of feels like a variation on the verse melody from the vocals. I'm not entirely sure about that. I tried to hone in on that, and I think the first bar or two sounds familiar, but I don't think it's identical. But again, that could just be part of the variation. It could be arranged a bit more drastically than a simple variation of just like adding a note or two, right? Regardless, I think they do a fantastic job at adding this extra line. Production wise and compositionally, it works very well. It doesn't quite distract. It is a bit cluttered. I think there's a lot going on, especially on that final chorus, but it ends up feeling balanced in a way that the producer definitely deserves some credit for. Drums, guitar, and bass are continuing to do what they do very well on this album, which is hold things down foundationally. Good rhythms, good bass tone, and big chords to act as foundation for not necessarily the more important parts, but the key element, the vocals, the melodies, right? And of course, they do get a time to shine. We saw the atmospheric parts in here, completely instrumental, where the guitarist gets to show off some of the tones that they've crafted, which helps tell the story of the song too. It isn't just for showing off, it is definitely for the song's sake. At this point in the album, I'm really happy with what I'm listening to. It is quasi-proggy post-hardcore. It kind of feels like it's venturing a little bit into the swancore area without really getting too far into it. I don't know if that's because swancore wasn't around yet. This could be proto-swancore, or if they simply just didn't want to go that far. There's still a very large foot left back into the post-hardcore area here. But there's little decisions everywhere that kind of push this album forward. The first track is wildly creative at adapting the genre into something a bit more creatively complex, both timbre-wise and compositionally. Tracks 2 and 3 do sit a bit more into the standard PHC fare, but this track right here did explore trying to create narrative storytelling within the music, getting away from just using the guitars as chordal sounds or texture sounds and trying to tell story with it. I'm curious to see where else they go with this. I was kind of worried about this. Not that I thought 7 minutes was going to be too long for them, but that the songs they had played so far, they felt like they were just barely long enough to do what they needed to do. Especially with something like track 2, where even though it was like 4.5 minute runtime, it was actually like 3.5 minute with a really lengthy electronic solo at the end. I was really curious if they were going to be able to pull off a 7-minute track without it feeling too lengthy, but this ended up passing by really quickly, and the length was absolutely necessary for the story that I got out of the music. It makes me excited to check out the last two tracks on this album, which are 7:45 and 7.5 respectively, and see what they do to wrap up the album with these big epics. Curious to see if they push in a different direction, though. This one does have energy, but it's also more somber than the other three that we've checked out, and it would be interesting to see if they can keep this type of energy up, focusing on more of something that musically lined up with a track like The Crop and the Pest. Though we also have a 2-minute song in here, which I think is going to be a blast. And for the next half hour or so, everything's going to be rather short. Like I said, we're going to start doubling up on tracks, as most of my comments are probably going to start overlapping between songs heavily. Although they could surprise me and do a lot of unique ideas like what we saw here. Let me check out some lyrics for this one, and then we'll push forward. Alright, this track does tell a story in 3 parts, not quite as vignette-y as I had originally anticipated, but it's still about a young child who had parents that weren't necessarily fit for either parenting or even their relationship as a whole. They ended up having an unexpected child, and the dad just didn't want anything to do with it, and they also had to, make ends meet, so they didn't really have a lot of time to raise the child either. And so the father ends up becoming a drunk and walking out on the family after telling his son that he is a shameful seed. The mom tries their best to make ends meet, but it's tough. And later in life, this is our first time skip. There's court-ordered visits, which means weekends with Dad. And there he says, I learned his share of lessons, like how to drink like an old man. He realized his mom began packing bags and trying to chase those dreams that she failed to achieve when she was younger, now just living in a single-room apartment. Our next time skip showcases that the boy is grown up now and his sins of the father, invisible circles. Following in the footsteps, though, is what's going on here, the doomed cycle. And he has grown up to be somebody who also cheats on his spouses, who is also somebody who drinks too much and has willful ignorance about everyone else. At the end, though, we have a shift back to the child voice within, just feeling like so much weight was put upon them. They say that they were a light bulb, a wishbone, a rifle, a telephone, all tools between the two parents. But that now it feels like they have nothing left to lose. Remnants of a precious metal that weighs him down. Yep. That's what that song's about. So, another heavy topic and negative overall theme of the song. I'm going to push forth with the next batch of tracks. I forgot to read a little bit about the group there, so I'll do that during our next stopping point. Let's dive into the next track, Smoke and Mirrors. Texture, slight melodic element against heavy chord usage. Lots of texture-based stuff, whether it's squealing guitars over here or the 16th note playing over here. Bass coming in with something strong and funky. A little bit of a bouncing between the two guitars. like the halftime feel, but the speed of the vocals drives forward an urgency that the rest of the song doesn't have. Yeah, we got some bells in here. Vibraphone, maybe marimba. I like it either way. The muted guitar work keeps the energy low so we can build. Oh, dang, they faked me out. Oh, a little bit of a variation on the chorus here. Yeah. All of that noise and rhythmic contrast followed up with these little light vocalizations. Really fun bouncing idea here. So many different rhythms. More rhythmic information. Oh, they're really taking their time with this one. They're not going for the high contrast shift, they're going to build out of it. Really nice harmony work with all the backing vocal stuff. Oh, we have bells here, glockenspiel. Really like that sub bass going on. A type of like plodding through all of this light. want to stop here for analysis, but I feel like this is building up into track 7, and it would be a really bad place to stop. Beautiful. Well, maybe not. I think we can stop here. Yeah. I thought we were going to build into the next track, but we brought all that down. Yeah, I like Smoke and Mirrors. I thought that was a solid track. Keeping with the consistency of tracks 2 and 3, returning back to a more standard style of writing. I did really enjoy the bells coming in, though, and I'm glad we got to hear more of them in track 6, although I think we were more in the family of the vibraphone in track 5 and more in the glockenspiel of track 6. But regardless, we have mallets hitting blocks of whatever, wood in the case of vibraphones, metal for glockenspiels, creating pitched hits. So it's just beautiful. I love the way, and utilizing the metallic sound for this track 6 here really resonates the bright glistening that I kind of get from it, whereas utilizing what I think was a vibraphone in track 5 gives it more of an earthy, hollow warmth that I think fit it better than if they were vice versa, and having, they're two very different tones. They're good in different places. Like, I don't think I need to explain how that works. But hearing, again, just the wide variety of instrumentation that we have on this album, I'm a big fan of it, and I can't wait to see what else they have, because honestly, just it keeps impressing me, all the various sounds. This is what I've talked about in the past, too, about like a type of static contrast on an album. When I listen to an album, I'm usually in the mood for a very specific sound. So if I want something heavy and aggressive, I'm going to put on metal. If I want something a bit lighter, maybe it's a pop emo album or pop music. But I don't want the same sound every track. I just want the same foundation. It's very rare for me to listen to a band or an album where every song is wildly different, because that requires a lot of different moods. But I don't like heavy repetition either. It's where black metal kind of tends to falter for me on the album side, is that a lot of the black metal albums we've checked out might have various ideas compositionally, but the sonic palette is very similar from track to track. And so this is exactly what I look for in my casual listening, where all the songs generally fit within a post-hardcore framework. They're all generally in the same vibe of emotion and feeling, but they're all unique on their own. They all bring a little something different to the table. And in this case, we have a wide palette of instruments on display. Atmosphere varies a little bit from track to track as well, but it really is just the sounds going into my ear that are constantly changing every few minutes. And I'm a big fan of that. Keeps things fresh enough, but contained enough to keep me interested without requiring a lot of different mindsets. And this is just, it does such a good job with that. What does that say? Oh, yeah, the end of track 5. Going to the rhythmic, gritty texture thing with the bouncing back and forth of different instruments, giving this really gritty, almost electronic style thing going on. It was a massive departure from the chord heavy stuff that we were seeing earlier, primarily filling out space with these long held out notes. And it was just a really cool shift into this. It kind of comes out of nowhere and fills a very unique sound. And I don't know, it was nice. Just a little change of things in a way that I felt was still congruent with what the song was doing, but different enough to kind of snap me out of whatever mindset I was in at the time and be like, oh, whoa, well, what is this? This is very cool. That was a wild ending. Track 6 here. I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, the main stuff here. We have the light bells, we have the guitars that are higher pitched, everything kind of creating this glistening element. There aren't really held out notes here. It's a bunch of twinkling sounds everywhere. We have instruments that are sort of creating a hocket where one instrument will play a note and then another instrument will play a note and then another instrument will play a note. And so when you listen to it all together, it's this quick moving pitched melody. But if you're listening to the individual timbres, they're changing every single hit. A different instrument is contributing to this larger idea on every single note. And we have two guitars and the bell, whatever it is, a glockenspiel, probably some sort of keyboard sound. And they're all sort of trading off who gets to play what note, but we also have the production of it where everything is placed differently in the mix. And so not only is the melody bouncing around between all these instruments, there's also this physicality of the sound bouncing around me as I'm listening to it. And I just think it's a really gorgeous sound overall, a fantastic atmosphere that they're building. And of course, it's supported by this very large foundation, I guess we can call it. These very stacked, wide, warm vocal cords, just holding out these chords underneath this glistening bouncing around of all these sounds. And it just creates this beautiful atmosphere of twinkling twilight against, solid black of the sky, I suppose. It's these beautiful warm harmonies with this gorgeous twinkling around it, and it stands in such stark contrast to everything else on the album. We have heard, just Smoke and Mirrors, one track earlier. We had heard the bouncing rhythmic ideas, but that was with these gritty, distorted tones. That was harsher. This is very light and vibrant and dexterous. We have heard wide vocal harmonies on this album, but not quite like this, which feels more like a choir of angels than, I guess we could say, the whinier vocals that we've heard elsewhere on this track. These are very chesty, very airy, just very, very different from the loud, belted, full-bodied sound that we've heard throughout the rest of this track. And so, again, it's stuff that we've heard previously recontextualized in ways that contrast the rest of the album, creating a moment of new, while still retaining, I think, in the composition, the chord usages and the melodies that are written, still sitting within the realms of what they have been playing. It is a little bit new and a little bit old. A little bit recontextualized and a little bit of what we've been hearing. And I really love that. I think they do a fantastic job of that, of crafting something new while still being palatable. It's a hair bit of progressiveness, not enough to actually do anything wildly experimental, but enough to, I think, sit above your contemporaries as somebody who's doing something that not everyone else is. The last thing I want to bring up, since we are in the middle of the album here, I think I'm pretty well versed in this, is the vocal dexterity. And I sort of touched on it there. A lot of this is very full-bodied, higher range stuff, but we just got done hearing some lower range, wider, airier stuff. Kind of more of an ethereal vocal delivery. We've also heard belting in here. We have heard falsettos. We've heard mixed chest and head, and we've even heard a little bit of grit. I think it was in Salesman, the Husband, and the Lover, where at the very end of the song, we didn't really go into a harsh vocal, but put a little bit of natural compression on their vocal just to get a little bit of grit, possibly a way to deliver an element of frustration in the vocals. But the vocalist is wildly dexterous, doing so many different styles. And of course, just a beautiful voice as well with all the harmonies that they're putting up. They have a very strong control over their voice, and I'm enjoying it. You know, the vocals are certainly the big draw here. I think, not to discredit anybody else in the group, but again, they're what I tend to get transfixed on most in here, and there's always something interesting going on with the vocals. All right, I think that is it. I'm going to check out some lyrics for these two and some information about the group. I'm going to try to remember that this time. Halfway point's a good time to get some extra context, and then we'll run into the back half of this album. Smoke and Mirrors is about not falling for deception. We started off with a semi-spoken version of the chorus. Says, hook, line, and sinker, your smoke and mirrors, I won't ever take the bait. Your greedy fingers won't ever get their hands on me. Every verse then just leads more into this. The first verse talks about wolves that wear sheep's clothing. They wear the wool that the sheep that they have fooled. And it says, you may have my wool, you may have my locks, but my voice you'll have not. We eventually get to see this described not as wolves, but vultures, licking their lips as they crush and they claw their way to the top. It calls them greedy people climbers, using your legs as ladders and your head as just another step. We then relate them back to men in suits. It says that these suits, they have big black knives in them, but you can't put me on the company dime. No matter who you send to me, I won't be fooled by them either. It says, despite your most gentle song and your most soothing call, you won't lead this sheep astray. This falls in line with the themes of the album so far. Not so much about the relationship and heartbreak, but about people deceiving and taking advantage of others. It does reiterate this several times, though. I found by the middle of the lyrics, I was ready for something else to pop up, and nothing ever did. We just continue to reiterate and find new metaphors for it. I don't think that's a problem in and of itself, but at least for this specific topic and the ways it was spoken about, I was not quite as on board with it as I have been for other lyrical sets. A realization of the ear is actually quite short. All the songs so far have had rather lengthy bits of lyrics, which makes sense given just how prominent the vocals are and the fact that we usually have multiple vocal lines going on. There's a lot of words being said. This one is rather short though, and leans more into the self-loathing of the album. It says, don't love me, don't you dare care for me, I will only bring you pain. The end of the song says, so this is what it's like to disappear, with the music of the spheres still ringing in my ear, bringing back the line from track number 2, was it? Yes, where he said, please don't let me disappear, don't leave me behind. A fear of not being remembered. And so here he is at a moment of being forgotten, of disappearing. Now, there's not a lot to dig into that I found about the album in general. The title of it comes from a book written by Johannes Kepler, and it's called The Earth Sings Me Famille. And it was about Kepler's theory that each of the 9 planets in our solar system produced tones as they orbited the sun that reflected the phrases that we give for the notes, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then back to do. And so the third and fourth are mi and fa, and the third planet is Earth, and the fourth planet is Venus. So there's probably more to that. I kind of hope there is, but that is just the general surface level gist that I got. And apparently they were fans of this book and they stuck with that phrase, the earth sings me famille. Other than that, I can't really find anything about those specific notes that would relate back in any sort of metaphoric way, maybe a linguistic way, to what this album is about, which again so far is very emo. It's about relationships and how I'm not a great person and everyone should just forget me anyways. A lot of self-loathing and heartbreak in this album. I did go on their Wikipedia page though, and something stood out to me. A specific name of a past member, Casey Crescenzo. May recognize that name from... Why am I blanking out on this? Oh, yeah, The Deer Hunter. We have checked out quite a few of tracks from that group, as well as a... man, why can't I think of the era of classical music that Casey did as a solo project, and completely blanking out on me. Dang, that's a shame. Anyways, Casey did some classical music, and we did a reaction to one of his songs, and it was phenomenal, and I've enjoyed The Deer Hunter in the past. I think we did a full album. Antamai was one of theirs, right? Yeah. So we did a full album reaction. Casey is somebody who I've just always enjoyed listening to. Since you guys have introduced me to him, I didn't know about Casey prior to starting this channel. And I think it's wild that he's also tied to this group, although this album doesn't have him on it. He was only on the first album, and this, of course, is their second and final. So that's a bit of a shame. But also, when I click on the personnel list for this album, we have Alex Bars doing lead vocals and Brendan Brown doing lead vocals. No one else does. Yeah, there's no other vocals, just the two of them. So I've been talking about multiple vocal tracks, but honestly, it might be multiple vocal lists. I don't know how often who does what. As far as I can tell, all the vocals sound very similar to me, enough that I thought they were all the same vocalists. So I'm kind of curious where the responsibilities shift and where the line divides them. Who tends to do what? Especially since they're both listed as lead, which makes sense because the vocals are, we have 2 vocal sets in a lot of songs, and while one typically feels like backing to me, usually a repeated phrase or motif, more so than the linear poetry that we hear in what I consider the lead vocal line, it's possible that they trade off who's doing the lead and who's doing the repeated background stuff. I've mentioned that we have a keyboard in here, and we do have a keys player. The bass guitarist does play keys, as well as another guitarist. Yeah, they have 2 guitarists. 2 guitarists, bass, drum. No, they have 3 guitarists. 4. Yeah, 3 guitarists and a bass. But three of them also play keys, which I'm going to assume is keyboard. We also have 4 glockenspiel players here. And I always figured glockenspiel was metal. Yeah, aluminum or steel bars arranged in a keyboard layout. Similar to the vibraphone. The vibraphone is the metallophone family, consisted of tuned metal bars. So the vibraphone's different than a marimba. Interesting. Anyways, I'm learning a lot here that I need to do on my own time, I suppose. But it doesn't say anything here about anybody playing a marimba or a vibraphone. And so everything I've heard was metallic. Well, no, I heard metallic and wooden, but according to this personnel list, everybody plays the glockenspiel, the metallic type of hit keys. We do have 2 string players, Heather and Jessica. We heard them on... Was that the end of track 4? I think it was. Well, we might hear more of them since it doesn't specifically say, only on track 4 or something like that. So, and then a lot of people do programming. 4 of the 5 members do programming, and our producer also does additional programming. So there is a lot of digital things going on in here. And nobody does a single thing. Everybody does multiple instruments. And that's just amazing to me. I love it. You can hear the flexibility in the music. It's why it's so varied. There's so many ideas coming together. All right. We're going to push forward here. The next track is called Saturnus. It is one of the shorter ones. It doesn't even hit 4 minutes like most of the other songs do. We'll probably run it into Wanderers, but we'll see if I have anything worth stopping to talk about. All that energy into this halftime, just really reining it in. That really wide gap between the vocals. Yeah, shifting between very dense rhythmic ideas and very dense harmonic ideas. They're doing this a lot, and they do both sides very well. Very light, ethereal, dreamlike, shifting to the falsetto vocals. getting some more of those harsher vocals in there. This is a much denser version of the dual vocals than we've heard. I think that is the most clear ending to a track we've heard so far. They've either smoothly gone into the next or kind of alluded that they could, just kind of brought the energy down and then built it back up after a short pause. That is a deliberate end though. Moving from all that heavy energy, lots of forward momentum, into this slower, laid-back idea. That little shimmer off to the right as a transition. False little build up there. When we turn the snare off, we're hitting the sticks together. Very cool use of the drum kit on this one. Taking the stick hitting rhythm and then putting on the toms here. Beautiful way to ramp up the intensity. This is a cool direction that it went into, but what was that last part? lot of metric modulation in this track too. I wonder if that's going to pop up in here at all. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, is a Christian child song thing. Alright. Track 7 is rather straightforward. I don't even think I took any notes on it. I really enjoyed it though. I think it's a fun track. There's some cool work going on. I like the aggressiveness of the vocals in that one. But a lot of it musically was rather straightforward, and I don't have anything new to speak about for it. However, Wanderers, man, this is... For the first half of the track, there's only one vocalist. Do you know how isolating that feels? How small it feels? It's alone in a way that most of this album hasn't been. I'm used to so much, not chaos, but stuff happening. So the vocal part, it's kind of sitting above the song, and the production is eventful always. And here we have a lonely, low energy vocalist holding out these longer notes, not a lot of rhythmic movement, not a lot of energy in the delivery, and alone. There's no counterpoint to it. There's no harmony to it. It is immediately noticeable, especially coming off of the intensity of Saturnus. We're reining all that in, dragging the album down to this depth that we haven't really hit yet. Salesman kind of dropped the... No, it was Crop and the Pest, wasn't it? No, it was Salesman. Yeah, kind of dropped the energy down a little bit, but much like this, it ramps back up. But it does pull the energy in a little bit after Saturnus. But it's not just that. The album has had a pretty consistent ebb and flow of energy, whether that is within each individual song or when you look at the album as a whole. The peaks and valleys of the album, it's a nice ride. Nothing ever stays stagnant for too long. So it's expected after something as big as Saturnus to kind of bring the energy down a little, but also to make it a solo vocalist. It feels kind of wrong. I do enjoy, generally, the first half of this track, though. The atmosphere it creates, the loneliness, the expansiveness, it almost feels like it could go on forever. Musically, we don't really go anywhere. It's a cycle. We're not really pointing in any direction other than one step in front of the other. We don't really have a destination, but we're not sitting still either. And that's what the music tells me. There's a chord progression. The chords are functional harmony. They tell us pretty much where to go next, but we end up just doing the same circles over and over and over. Musically, as far as the words are concerned, the vocal delivery, it's just a short ostinato. Not really going anywhere with that either. The drums are content with being light. I do like the drum work. I'll touch on that later, but everything's just chill. It's like I said, it's wild. To me, it stands out so much in this album, and it is what makes me want to put it as my favorite track here. I don't think I enjoyed Wanderers in total. I don't know that I want to put it as my favorite, but the opening 2 or 3 minutes were absolutely phenomenal in the context of the album that I have to rate it pretty highly. the ending of this track does go in a direction that I don't think we've seen yet. It is chaotic. There's multiple melodies coming from the guitars. We have the bass and drums incorporating ideas rhythmically. We have multiple vocal lines going off, and they're a bit involved as well, a bit more complex. It is what we've heard in other songs, but I think to a higher degree than anything else. It is more chaotic than what we've heard previously. I don't know how I'm supposed to interpret this against the beginning of the song, which is isolating and lonely. About wandering infinitely through this area by yourself. I'm hoping that it's supposed to mean finding help. We'll have to get to the lyrics in a bit and find out, but I do like the way it ends up. And the way the building into it was nice, and the payoff at the end of the song was totally worth it. There's a part in the middle, though. This album, not really instrumental heavy. There are ornamental sounds. We get to hear a bunch of cool instruments here. And without the instruments, the song would sorely be lacking, but they're not a core focus. They never really take the spotlight. And they did here. We had 2 guitar solos. That in and of itself is noteworthy, but what the instruments played was wild too. Both performed atonal melodies? I'm not really sure how to interpret it yet. I don't know if they were just completely outside of the key, with every note being an odd choice, or if there was some intonation things going on. Maybe they, I don't know, holding the whammy bar down just a little bit to flatten the tones just a hair. I have no idea what was going on, but there was so much dissonance and tension in those 2 solos that they almost felt like they were playing the wrong notes. It's possible it all comes together thematically for some reason, but in the moment, all I could think of was, why? Why is the first guitar solo in this whole album harmonically wrong? Not consonant. And we pull out of that to head back into the usual stuff. Guitars as foundation, a nice moving idea, bass, drums, and the vocals on top. 2 vocals now. The way that the album has been. Consonant harmony and catchy vocal melodies. What's the purpose of those 30 seconds of wild guitar work? At this point, I don't know. But that does create a song that I divide up into 3 parts, where all 3 are noteworthy for one reason or another. I really like the contrast of part 1 against Saturnus. I like the new way that it feels, the isolation of it. Part 2's solos are remarkable because we don't have solos in the album, and because it's one of the few times we've really dipped into harmonic dissonance. And part 3, because as I mentioned, I think it's one of the more chaotic endings to a song. There is a lot going on, and it all comes together beautifully, but it's still really difficult to take it all in. Unlike other songs where we stack up the layers and I sort of just understand it all, my brain wanted to divide all this up. It was tough to hear it as a unified wall of sound, so to speak, but it definitely is not easy to comprehend the 5 or 6 moving parts going on here. There's a lot of musical information. And I think that's why I wanted to put it so high on my list. Why I still almost want to make it my favorite, even though it's just not as consistent as some of the other songs I've enjoyed. I'm going to find some lyrics for these 2, and then we'll probably do the next 2 back to back since they're not even 6 minutes combined, and then we have our 2 7-minute songs to wrap this up. We'll probably listen to each alone and then do some analysis on them. This one's a bit more vague than any of the other tracks. Saturnus, we're talking about here. But I really like the way that the words flow. I don't know if this has a different lyricist than some of the other songs. The other lyrics tend to be clear about what they're speaking about on the surface level, and I've been picking up on the metaphorical side as well, so I'm feeling pretty happy about that. But as far as linguistics go, they tend to be a bit on the simple side. This one is the opposite. I don't really have a grasp on what it's talking about, but the way that it flows and the way that the syllables mend and bend and rhyme, it is a blast. Just check out this opening stanza. I've got this little itch that I never learned to scratch. It seems that even if I had, I'd rather itch than not, when the pleasure is the lesser and it's giving to the pressure of an ever-growing lust and an always present want. It doesn't quite have a nice rhyme scheme, but the flow of everything, especially that third line, is just really fun. It just rolls right off the tongue. We have the chorus that says, all this is yours, so here's your piece of it, your part in it. Clench your jaws with claws, you'll strangle it, you'll smother it. Damn right, I want nothing to do with this, no part of it. Keep locked your jaws, I hope you choke on it. There's so many ways that this rhymes. I mean, we also have this recurring use of blank blank it, which helps a lot of it flow well. But we also have interline rhyming too, so that we don't just have this one repetition of sound, which could get boring over time. There's also a rhythmic cadence to it that shifts and ebbs. And yeah, it's written in a totally different format than any other of the songs, I think. I don't remember being as impressed with the linguistics of any of the lyrics up to this point. What I do get out of this, though, is we have somebody who is pushed past their brink. They're tired of the wanting for more. They're tired of waiting for change. They're tired of happiness. Most of all, I think they're just tired of being tired, and whatever it takes for them to find solace, they'll do it, even if it means giving up parts of themselves to someone else, going along with some of the themes of this album, such as people abusing other people, taking advantage of them. This whole idea of this piece of mine is yours. I don't care what you do with it. I hope you choke on it. Just get away from me. Yeah, take what you need and leave. I don't care what state I'm in afterwards, as long as you're gone. There's one part in here, he says, it's a fight to death just to keep it. This mere fondling is mine. I've cared so much with proving that I've lost all love for proof, an ever-growing craving for a quickly fading feeling. I'd trade my soul for a great big hole in a heart too hard to heal. It's just somebody who is so fed up with the way things are. At one point, a repetition of the phrase, my heart is ringing out of tune. Yeah, this I think is a nice high point in the album of kind of tying together several of the themes. I don't think this is a concept album in that there's a narrative story going along with the central protagonist, but it is a bunch of vignettes of people who all have similar issues in their life. And this kind of ties it all together. All of the narratives here are so fed up with the way that things are going on around them, and this is just the penultimate showcase of the way that they all feel. This song also kind of encapsulates a lot of ideas here and shines a light. That's a nice little pun you'll get in a second. on some of the history of some of these characters. And I'm beginning to think maybe they all are the same character. I'm not entirely sure yet. But anyways, it is the idea that the song basically says, I know I was in charge of my own growth. And it's my fault that I'm not as good of a person or as in high standing, or that my life isn't as great as it could have been because of decisions I made, because of choices I made. The opening stanza is a perfect, what's it called? Like when you want to define what something's about, a thesis statement for the song. It says, this little light of mine, I was told to let it shine, but I stood idly by and watched the poor flame die. I could have grown into something big, but I didn't. I just chose not to build myself. I didn't invest in who I was or in my own future. And he says, I kept it from bushel and brush. I never gave it any way to grow. I did keep it away from the grasp of men, but I also left it in the lantern in the light, where the flame could blend right in. I really like the second verse. It says, don't let Satan blow it out, the teachers always said, but soon enough he figured out it wasn't worth his breath. Because this little light of mine is losing all its bright, not to the dark I hold inside, but to the dark kept from its sight. It was just never given a chance to do anything. He never gave himself a chance to do anything. The light was never really big enough to get snuffed out anyways. It was just always a little part in him. So there is a little bit of offering it up to nature. I was just never destined to be a bright light, but also he accepts responsibility. I never did anything to help either. Now, there is a recurring stanza here. It says, her I'll learn to hold. She will grow and grow. She will shine so bright. For all this dark won't swallow all the light that I hide, but still host. There is not a feeling of defeat here. I think this is really important. It isn't just a sob story. It isn't just, oh, woe is me, life sucked and I didn't do anything to improve it. Look at my life now. But it's understanding that there's still time. I still host light inside, and I won't let the dark swallow this up. But this idea right here, her I will learn to hold. She will grow and grow. She will shine so bright. It's the only time in this entire in this entire song that isn't spoken about the first person. Everything else is I, or my light, or the light in me. And then we have these three lines. I will learn to hold her, and she will grow so bright. And I'm curious what this is. It really could point to anything. My hope is that it's a relationship that's going to help him. A healthy relationship, hopefully, unlike all the ones in the other songs that have ended poorly. But I also worry that it's a song about having a child. Children don't fix people. And we've already had a song about the invisible circles of taking on the traits of your parents and failing to be a good parent yourself when your parents weren't a great role model. Like I said, though, it's vague what this her is, who it is, what the relationship is to this person. So I don't want to jump to any conclusions there. But it could really go any direction. Alright, and that leaves us with 4 songs to go. This one is a bit more on the popular side, called Stay Small. Then we have a little 2-minute song called Music of the Spheres, which I think is what one of the lines were in A Realization of the Ear, about not wanting to disappear while hearing the music of the spheres or something like that. I don't know. Let's check this out, see what's going on with this little 5-minute of music. 5-minute block of music. Okay. Yeah, so I think this is the first time we've had a section that isn't in 4/4. We've had some polyrhythmic sections in the past that we could interpret in a triplet vibe, but I mean that's the closest to a meter deviation. We're still in 3. I like that rhythmic pattern. Daddy's little girl, please stay small. I think my other interpretation of Wanderers about being a parent. The two guitars trading off. The gap in the bass. Yeah, I like how this album jumps back and forth between more straightforward post-hardcore and more progressive styles, where A Realization of the Ear was a very cool exploratory album, and then we went to Saturnus, which is pretty standard, and then Wanderers was more exploratory, Stay Small was pretty standard, Music of the Spheres seems to be more progressive here. Oh, I wasn't expecting it to come back down. I was actually really tempted to stop it in the middle, since it seemed like it was just going to keep repeating, because I figured it'd move into track 11. I don't really have a lot to add here, but I want to talk about Music of the Spheres real quick. Stay Small is, like I mentioned, a very straightforward post-hardcore track. We tend to have two guitars doing two different things. One is usually doing 16th note picking, and the other one is just chords, or maybe they're going back and forth with sharp, short staccato sounds. It's a lot of S's. The bass just has some cool walking bass lines. The drummer's killing it, and we have cool vocal stuff going on. I do like the rhythmic thing in the vocal melody for Stay Small, though. I thought that was a pretty nice change up from some of the other ones. But all in all, it's not really a song that stands out too much from a lot of other bands who play in that style. And like I said, that's one of the things I like about this album, is that it jumps back and forth between them. If you like pretty straightforward post-hardcore, there's a few songs in here for you. Every other one, almost. If you want something a bit more experimental, they got some of that too. Pushes a little bit outside the bounds, using post-hardcore as a jumping off point. But also, if you only like one of them, the other one can introduce you a little bit. This could very well be a bridge album for somebody who enjoys post-hardcore and didn't really think they would like anything that pushes the boundaries a little bit. And they may find out that they like several songs in here, and it pushes them towards more progressive music, maybe even eventually swancore. I don't know why I paused there. It's a really weird. I was trying to think of what I want to say next, but no, it's just a really nice thing that there's variety on this album, and it's not stacked one way or the other. We've heard some albums where like the first half and the back half are two totally different feels, and this one keeps things fresh, bouncing back and forth. Music of the Spheres, though, I'm not sure the point of it. It just feels like a cute little interlude. It's got that nice little bell melody going on, and that's about it. I was hoping for some development on it, and we don't really get that either. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is just supposed to be a little palate cleanse, a little way to reset your ears before going into the longest, most epic track on this album, track 11. Again, I don't know. But there's no lyrics to it, there's no development to it, there's no movement to it. It just is what it is. And so, like I said, this was going to be a short analysis anyways. We're going to find some lyrics for Stay Small, but I kind of got the gist of it already based on the few words I picked up, and then we're going to run into the next two tracks. Alright, so I didn't pick up on everything. The song is about wanting your children to stay innocent of the hardships of life, but I didn't catch that the first stanza was about a son. The second stanza is about a daughter. So it doesn't really tie back into the last track as much as I thought it did. Now, one thing that I'm kind of noticing, and I don't think it should stand out to me as much as it does, but it starts with "Son, I'm sorry for this world and all the awful things she'll do to you." But when it comes to Daddy's little girl met the world, we don't have any sort of personification like that. Nothing in here is about how a hymn is going to ruin her. The personification of the world as a hymn. I find that to be a really strange gentrification thrown in here. That kind of leans into a little bit of what I felt earlier but didn't vocalize because I didn't think I had enough evidence for it. But this album is not very kind to women at all. And I don't think there's anything else to say about that. But this one, I don't think in any other album it would affect me as much. But just saying that the world is awful, the world, she will do awful things to you. It feels so awkward given all of the songs about the women that have ruined men's lives on this album. I'm not saying that the lyricist is a misogynist, but this album does take on misogynistic language at times. And yeah, this is one where it's a little awkward. But anyways, both of these stanzas are the world's going to be cruel to you. You're going to experience hardships, and there's nothing I can do to save you from that. And it's going to suck, and I'm going to feel heartbreak about it. And then we get the chorus, which says, I know you'll grow, but I wish you knew that you'd stay small if I said so. Just please don't grow, just stay small. I get the gist of this, right? As a parent myself, I don't want my child to feel heartache or despair or pain of any sort, especially though the mental and emotional stuff that adults go through. It's a part of living. There's just no there's no avoiding it. No one's going to no one's going to get through this life completely unscathed. And yeah, and that sucks. And wanting to protect them from that I think is natural. But there's a very small part of me when he says, just please don't grow, that I'm like, no. What is living if you're just innocent of all the hardships of life your whole time here? I mean, humanity, our lives are defined by the hardships and how we overcome them. Like I said, it's natural to want to protect your children, but I don't think it's natural to want to shelter them. I might just be reading too much into this. I was already sort of off put on line 2, so I'm going to take some of the responsibility on this myself. And again, I don't want to put words into the vocalist's or the lyricist's mouth here. I understand the gist behind this. It's another section that just isn't gelling well with me, and always comes in threes. Part of the second verse that we don't see in the first verse. Again, the boy is told life's going to be rough and there's nothing I can do to help you. But verse 2 says, Daddy's little girl. We're talking about a daughter now. And the second part of it says, it's because I truly love her that I wish to take back the work that brought her here in the first place. Yeah, I wish my daughter was never born. That's how much I love her. That's just, no, no. This whole song is just truly bonkers to me, which is kind of, I like the music. I thought the track itself was fun, and I really love the rhythm of the vocals in the chorus. It is a really catchy chorus, but I don't like these lyrics at all. And like I said, I get them, right? I'm not saying that these are bad lyrics or they shouldn't exist or anything like that. I get it. It's just, it's not my perspective, and it's so much, there's so much friction against my opinion on this that I don't want to hear these words. I just, they don't make me feel good, and they kind of make me feel icky, and that's a weird description, icky, but it's true. I'm just, yeah, not my cup of tea there, lyrically. That's weird. Also, something I want to bring up here. Lyrically, we still have two more songs to go through, but I listen to a lot of music with self-loathing, self-deprecating words. I grew up on emo, and post-hardcore also kind of has some overlap. It isn't quite as universal as emo tends to be, but post-hardcore has its fair share of bands and albums who sing about how they're just not a great person. One of my favorite lines that I think I've ever heard comes from Hail the Sun. And he says, I tried to write down all my character flaws, but the pen ran out of ink. Like, I love lines like that. I don't know what it is about them. It's just, it works, and it's probably weird to hear because I'm not usually a big fan of negative vocals. This is one of my big sticklers with metal lyrics is they can get rather negative. But there's just something about the type of self-deprecation that emo and post-hardcore has that just doesn't affect me. And so, like, I'm listening to a lot of these lyrics, though, and I'm like, this is actually post-hardcore by music only. Lyrically, this could probably be an emo album. There are some choices where I don't think it's quite as dramatic or thematic as emo would take it, but the general themes fit. Heartbreak, pain, self-loathing. Yeah, it says emo written all over it. But there's one thing that this focuses on that at least the emo that I've listened to doesn't. It's not necessarily a nihilism, but it is a fatigue, it is a giving up. This album seems to say that life sucks, everything's garbage, and there's nothing we can do to change that. Emo tends to say life sucks, everything's garbage, I'm not a great person, but we can change, or I can change if I'm with you, or as long as we're together we can fix the world. And there's always this element that love can save the day. Some of that probably just comes down to the emo side of things, being hyper-focused on love, and it not only being a vehicle for self-expression of the sorrow, but also, putting it on a pedestal as it can break me and it can save me. Everything's just suffering here. There has been no silver lining to this album. In fact, what I thought might have been a moment during that last track, Wanderers, that he found someone or something that would save him, a her, and I assumed, it might be a child. We get to the very next song, and it's, I wish I could make it so my child was never born because the world sucks. And it's just such a grim, dark, even edgier take on this negativity. I don't really think it affected me too much at the beginning of the album, but as I continue to go through these lyrics, it is draining me a bit as they get harsher. More, again, not really nihilistic, but hopeless. And that last song just, that flipped a switch in me. I really hope these last two do something else, a bit of uplift, if nothing else. But the next track is called The Heir of Empty Breath. Yeah. I don't think this is going to go anywhere. We're still talking about children, it seems. Familiar structures, probably, but not anything positive. Not based on that title. So, this is track 11. Yep. Let's see what's going on here. Another 3/4 song. Although, you can also feel it in 4 very clearly. That nice walk down on the bass. Dude, that is a funky guitar tone. So good. One of my favorite melodic tropes. One instrument holding out a note, the other one moving around it.
With all the pigments that you shed on the air of empty breaths of sulfur and sweat, I'm the king of what
Starting to see that a lot too. Where verse 1 is a bit more cohesive and verse 2 is fragmented with so many different rhythmic ideas. The dueling 16th note picking is a nice choice we haven't heard before. What? This is some Mars Volta transitions if I've ever heard them. The compressed crackling is a nice little additional texture to this section. I had originally thought that that sounded like finale. I know there is another track, but it wouldn't be the first time that a bonus track wasn't listed as bonus on Spotify. But no, that does go into the next. But that sounds like a really. I mean, the next track needs to, I think, really sell me on being an album closer. And I don't want to jump on this prematurely, but I feel like I harp on album closers a lot when we get to album reviews. I make it sound like it's an easy thing, but honestly, the ordering of your album is one of the hardest things to do in the process of album creation. You can ask any of your favorite bands or artists, if they how they would rank, what order they put their tracks in. Is that an easy task or a hard task? And I bet you every single one of them will tell you it's harder than writing the music. So, I feel like I take jabs at albums kind of letting me down in the end. There are only a handful of albums I can really think that ends really strongly. But it's really tough. It is. I don't want to make it sound like I'm some master, just always does it right and always picks out what's going to be the best. No, it's just, in retrospect, they put all the hard work into putting this album together, and I get to, point out the things that didn't work so well. So, although, I also give a lot of praise too. I'm not up here just being some sort of gatekeeper. But, yeah, I mean, we haven't even listened to the final track yet. So, again, I don't want to jump the gun on that too much. After Stay Small, I didn't think I was going to find something that I liked not so much. It's poor grammar, Bryan. But yeah, the Heir of Empty Breath was just okay. I think it was a solid 4-minute track. Nothing in it that really stood out to me. I liked the vocal hook, the drumming in here. I think this is one of the best drummed songs as far as interesting patterns. We had the 3 against 4 thing going on. I do think it's interesting also that Stay Small was in 3/4, and this one also was. It can be interpreted in groups of 3. If we exclude Music of the Spheres, which is a very light, shallow interlude, we have 2 back-to-back songs that are the only tracks in here that have any sort of 3 pulls to them. It's very interesting they shove these towards the back of the album. So I don't want to say that this song is completely without merit or anything of interest, but it just kind of bounced off of me, and anything that I did enjoy was forgotten after we hit the instrumental part, and that was what I remember most about this track. They went towards a very atmospheric, almost jammy style of playing, focusing on atmosphere and interesting guitar tones, utilizing reverb and compression and all sorts of different effects to create something that is atmospherically dense. There's definitely a vibe here, but that's not my cup of tea, and it's not really what the rest of the album has leaned into. It kind of takes what was sort of the focus of the first track and makes it the only component at the end here, which is also what sort of makes it work as a finale. That's why I'm really curious about Pale Blue Dot. It deviates from what the album does in order to explore something new, and I think it does explore that well. It just, to me, works as an album outro a lot more than a component of the Heir of Empty Breath. It feels completely divorced, and even getting into it was very awkward. I think at one point I even mentioned that it reminded me of the awkward transitions the Mars Volta uses in their more eclectic songs. Basically, this entire album, I have praised the fluidity of it, whether it is something a bit more experimental or a bit closer to the status quo of the genre. They have found ways to keep things interesting and having ideas move into one another in a sort of cohesive way. Sometimes they are rougher transitions, but the transitions themselves, the two sections, sound like they're designed to be played alongside each other. That contextually they make sense to have to be played back to back. And then we have a couple of really wild style shifts that take us to this atmospheric outro that has no connection to really anything on this album. We do have a couple of atmospheric tracks. The slower ones like Realization of the Ear and Wanderers both focus on atmosphere above all else, but they are more about crafting something that's somber and isolating, where this is more experimental, trying to see what kind of sounds they can create. We have these delayed echoing whale hums going on with the guitar. Is it a cool sound? Yes. Does it fit the atmosphere? Yes. What does it have to do with the album, though? I don't know. And it doesn't help that it's not my cup of tea either. Critically, analytically, I can't see its purpose within the larger artwork. I certainly can't see its purpose with the first 3 minutes of this track, and casually it totally bounced off of me. I want to give credit where credit's due, though. It is interesting, and it definitely takes guts to put this in here. And I would love to hear their interpretation of it. What was their goal in crafting it? Because right here, I can't even say if the execution was solid. I don't understand what it's supposed to be doing to begin with for me to even know if it does that well or not. And so, authorial intent would really help with this. Even if I end up saying, oh, you guys didn't really nail that at all, at least at that point I can have a definitive opinion on it, other than just, I don't know what's wrong with it, but it didn't click for me personally. I can't really have an objective take on this at all, because I don't know what it's attempting to do to even know if it did it well. So, again, though, I do want to point out, I feel like I'm super negative here, and I've been negative for like 20 minutes now, because I wasn't too keen on Stay Small either, so I want to lighten this up a little bit. They did do an excellent job. If this was an isolated thing, something completely divorced from the album, you just play this for me, I think that the idea of crafting this open, expansive vastness works really well, and the heavy echo that they utilize on the guitar work is very cool. The heavy compression that they have on some of the instruments, almost making it feel like it's overdriven tape crackle, I think creates a very cool context for everything. There is a narrative here that I think you can read into. I think it works better in isolation. I don't get its purpose tied to this song or this album, and I could have interpreted it as an album closer, but we have 7 more minutes of music on the album, so I can't do it that way either. Let me check out some lyrics for this, and then we will wrap the album up. And here we have More Self-Loathing. This is a song about not feeling like there's anything that you're worth living up for, so you're ready just to be taken away. The first verse says, like a blemish on an otherwise perfect skin, like a scar from a sore, like a stain that set in, I wallow in what I could have been. The chorus says, take me away from this place like a thief in the night, be a rapture and take me away. Calls himself the heir of empty breaths and the king of what could have been. Which I find wild, because just a couple tracks ago, I mentioned that there was a little bit of uplift. That it was mostly negative, but there was a small hint that they knew they could be better, and they wanted to. And here we are. Life sucks, and some would take me away from it. I don't know where the line is for me. where depressing lyrics are fine to where they become not fine. It might be a very blurry line in the sand, but this song, I feel, does kind of push over a little. I think when I was younger, I would have been more receptive of it, but as I grow older, I'm okay with looking down on yourself. I'm not okay on being hopeless. And somewhere between those two sides of a spectrum, somewhere in there is a line where lyrics get to a point that I don't gel with very well. And so here we are, another track that musically I thought was well done, at least for, everything except the end that I still don't get. But lyrically, I'm not on board for it. So let's wrap this up. We have 7.5 minutes ahead of us. Pretty consistently on their longer tracks, they will do a pretty standard. Oh, actually, no, because Salesman, Husband, and Lover was 3 groups of unique ideas. So, yeah, what I was going to say was completely wrong. Anyways, this last track is called Pale Blue Dot, which I'm pretty sure is going to be about Earth. Let's dive in, see how they wrap this album up. So all of that atmospheric stuff does bleed into this track. And maybe it does make sense not as an outro to the album, but as an intro to this final song. I kind of wish I had backed it up a little bit. I do hear the difference in the timbres now. No matter what they're singing about, their vocal harmonies are so freaking good. Ooh, that dark turn. There is a walk down, but right here, dude, that is a very tense chord to move on to. It wants to get off of itself so bad, and they just lean into the darkness of it. Five? Yeah. So we've been in 4/4 for this whole album, and they finish it up with 3 songs, not 4. Interesting. Very interesting for the tremolo picking to be overpowering the vocals. to 3. The glittering synth work over here with the glockenspiels here in the center. The vocals just soaring at this point. Very clever way of bringing this guitar line back from earlier. The clashing of bright and dark, light and heavy, dexterous and weighty, heaven and hell. I do notice that we have some places in here where instead of a 3 we'll have a 2. So I wonder if in a larger scale we are alternating between 6s and 5s at some phrasing that I'm not able to pick up on a first time. So I don't know if it's the same, but just this isolated instrument right here, the guitar, I counted 11 bars of 3 and then a bar of 2. I don't know if I was at the beginning of the phrase when I started my counting though, so I could be a little off on that, because that's awkward. You would expect 15 and a bar, because that would give us a 16 bar phrase, but 11... even when you add it together, that's 33 beats plus the 2 is 35. A 35 beat phrase? I mean, that's divisible. We could do 5 bars of 7 or 7 bars of 5, but both of those are also odd numbers of bars, so that's really wild. I wonder how they came upon that and if it means anything to them or if it's just what felt natural to do when to start that phrase over again. I generally enjoyed this track. It's gorgeous from start to finish. They do a fantastic job at creating these beautiful harmonies, of adding this dark tension beneath even the bright, vibrant playing. Of doing a little bit of foreshadowing with bringing the heavy guitars in, only to remove them once again and build the song up, crafting this levity, this gorgeous twinkling levity to the song once again, before incorporating that heavy guitar work underneath it and creating this yin and yang thing going on, where we have the light, beautiful, vibrant, dexterous, glittering part, and then the heavy, dark, weighty, brooding guitar work underneath it, getting both sides of this. I do hope the lyrics marry this. An entire song about the hardships of life and a moment of recognizing that that's what's necessary for life to have meaning, which I hope is why it's called Pale Blue Dot. It's about Earth. It's about how gorgeous it can be. Yeah, life can be tough, but there's good things that go with it too. I don't know, we'll get there in a second, but I did enjoy that. Something I want to bring up about the Heir of Empty Breath that I forgot about is a pattern, a trope that I had begun to notice in this album, is that first verses tend to be very either riff or chord based, but the whole band is usually in on it. Maybe the drums have a little bit of rhythmic syncopation, but the guitars and the bass are all working together in order to create this unified synergistic idea. The second verse tends to be more chaotic, with the hockets of multiple instruments all playing these short, quick hits, and hearing the variety of them creating this larger idea where the timbre is consistently changing. This is something that I talked extensively about on, was it Smoke and Mirrors when I brought this up? How I really loved the hocket in that track. But it is something that is consistently showcased in this album, and it's usually during a second verse as a variation on the first verse's ideas, usually shifting between harmonic and atmospheric style writing to rhythmic and textural style writing. And we actually see that all throughout this album, where that is more of a microcosm of it. We can look at the larger idea of vocals being very melodically driven, usually on top of chords creating atmospheres, and other sections which are more texture based, such as the extended outro of the Heir of Empty Breath. In fact, much of this album jumps between atmosphere and texture, chords and sounds, focusing on pitch and focusing on tone. And much like everything else, I mean, even talking about the ways that this album is more stereotypical of its genre and more exploratory of its genre, this album seems to be one at odds with itself, constantly bouncing back and forth between two extremes on a variety of parameters. And I really enjoy it. That's what creates a lot of the contrast that I've been praising across this album. The core idea is consistent throughout every song, and there really isn't a lot of super dynamic changes on this album, but they're always fluctuating on the scale from one side to another, sometimes finding a midpoint, but usually moving between the two ends on a variety of scales that allow the songs to all have their unique elements to them. What makes Saturnus stand out so much from Wanderers or Smoke and Mirrors? Why Pale Blue Dot is immediately recognizable against the Crop and the Pest. It's an album that isn't afraid to do a variety of things, to go in a variety of directions. And this is just another one of them. Having the verses, or having two different approaches to the verse. I really appreciate that in the Heir of Empty Breath, and every other song that does it. The music ends up feeling a lot more linear than the lyrics make the songs look, and I think that's impressive too. I do like Pale Blue Dot as an outro, though. Much better than the end of the Heir of Empty Breath, and I'm beginning to see that more as a transition, an interlude into Pale Blue Dot, in the same way that Music of the Spheres was. I think I would have interpreted a lot better if it was an isolated track like Music of the Spheres, but it isn't, and so it's just one of those things that you learn through experience and context. It's not supposed to be, I think, tied to the Heir of Empty Breath. It is an interlude that takes us into Pale Blue Dot, which allows the song to grow, reset a little bit, grow again, and then give us this schism, this diversity between the two sides, something that we have heard in this album, constantly jumping back and forth, but not too often have we heard them combined. Finally, we have found the medium point on the album that we have been searching for, metaphorically, lyrically at least, trying to find a way to swing from the extremes into something that is feasible something that's can endure the test of time. I'm hoping again that the lyrics go this route as well. The fade out, bringing just the electric guitar by itself to give us this final riff, I think worked well. The time signatures, I'm still not too sure about. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. The 3/4 idea in Stay Small was pretty cool. I like the 3/4 idea in Heir of Empty Breath as well. Pale blue dots all over the place. We have a 5. We have a 3. We had a 4 in there at one time as well, didn't we? Then we have the 3, but every once in a while we're going to throw in a 5 that we saw at the end of Pale Blue Dot. So it's very interesting, though, that as far as I can tell, the first 50 minutes of this album, 40 minutes of this album are all in 4/4, and then they just crammed all of their more complex metric stuff at the end of the album. And it's not even that complex. I mean, Stay Small and Heir of Empty Breath just have 3/4. That's also a standard time signature. It's just such a deviation from the 4/4 that we've heard for a majority of this album. And like I said, it's just an interesting decision to put all of this only in the back of the album. Let me read some lyrics for this, and then we're going to wrap this whole video up. And actually, I was quite right about this. It is about finding a medium point. It talks about his guilt blossoming in front of him, growing, towering over him, at one point even saying that these are the shameful seeds I've sown, repeating the words of the father from track 4, whatever that was called. The salesman, the husband, the lover. It says that it grows over and casts a dark shadow, but I can live in it. There's no place like home, after all. Says, grow your roots with me. Drink of me, you thirsty seed. I cower, cringe, and tremble at your solemn vow that ever you go, I'll follow. So you're not escaping this guilt. You can't undo it either. The mistakes of the past will stick with you forever, as stated here. You have to learn how to be okay with it, how to make peace with the past you. And so the song ends with, sticks and stones won't break my bones. It's the branches and boulders that I shoulder. I can live with it. I really like that too. Upgrading sticks and stones to branches and boulders, and those are the personification of your guilt that you shoulder. I think that's great. Upgrading stick to branch, stones to boulders, and then rhyming boulders with shoulders. All of this showcasing that the small things in life are nothing now that you've lived through such heaviness. Yeah, this is a nice optimistic element of the album, and puts a little positive turn on things that no matter what your life, no matter where you went with your life, what twists and turns your past took you on, there's no escaping it. You can't go back in time and fix anything. You have to come to terms with it. It's who you are, whether you like that or not. You can certainly decide that it's not something you can live with, and that's what the past song was about, wanting to have something take you away, just to get away from any of the negativity. But I think it's just as probable, and I think more important, to learn how to come to terms with what you've done in the past and reconcile that with who you are today, and find the middle point to forgive yourself for your mistakes and to take this next step towards a brighter future, not a repetition of the past things that you've done. To learn to live with the guilt that towers over you. And here we have the combination of the weight and pain and anguish of the past, which is that really heavy guitar stuff at the end of the track, mixing with the vibrant, dancey, glittering, beautiful element that we have sitting above it, which is the future. And quite possibly the present, of pairing who you are today with who you were before. Really beautiful imagery here. And I love it. I wish lyrically it went into it a little bit more. The concept of loving yourself, or learning to love yourself. I do think that the lyrics here are a bit shallow. both verses say the exact same thing. It uses the exact same metaphor of the seed of guilt growing and overshadowing you. It uses a couple of different words and ideas, but I do think some of their other songs have been a bit more exploratory in their metaphor when they wanted to recontextualize the same exact concept. But I would have loved for something here that isn't just so flat. We have 10 songs of lyrics about all of the ways that we're upset with ourselves, all the ways that we hate ourselves. There's so much depth to the negativity on this album. And then we get to the one positive song, and it's just that. There's no work towards it. It's just, yeah, I'm cool with it. I can live with it. That's the thing. There's no depth to it. It's lacking the work that goes into it. It's lacking anything else. I almost wonder if we couldn't have had a few more songs that talk about the growth, the transition into this, the work that it takes to want to be better, to reconcile with the past. This feels too immediate. I wish I had more of an arc for this theme rather than just snap, yeah, I guess I didn't want suicide after all. Everything's actually pretty good. I can deal with this. Look, my guilt gives me shade from the sun. Isn't that nice? It just feels too immediate, I think. But I do like having this as a punctuating part of the album. I just wish it were more fleshed out, more fully explored. But again, like I said, the lyrics are kind of shallow on this one, and maybe the lyricists are just that more well versed at writing negativity, which is possible. You know, it, regardless of what your theme is, people definitely have a preference. It's just like genre, whether that's music or film or book. Just because someone can write a thriller doesn't mean they can write a romance. And so just because people can write really effective and deep metaphors about self-loathing doesn't mean they can write great poetry about positivity or loving yourself and stuff like that. It takes a very different language despite and lived experience too. That also weighs into it. So, like I said, I would have liked a little bit more depth, but I think this is fine for what it is. Those are my thoughts. I think. Do I have anything else to say? I don't think so. I enjoyed the album, though, for the most part. And I want to check out their first one now, especially since I know Casey was doing the guitars and vocals. He wasn't the main vocalist, I don't think, but he was on it. And also, when I listen to that, I'll have listened to the entire discography of this group, which means I can throw them into my list of bands who I've listened to the whole discography of, even though this feels a bit cheap since it's only 2 albums. And one of them I got to do for the channel. But, yeah, I'll probably end up doing that, because I did like this, a majority of it. So yeah, those are my thoughts. The Receiving End of Sirens, The Earth Sings Mi Fa Mi, which I still don't know what that has to do with anything. What are your thoughts, though? Did you enjoy this? Was there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said, or correct me on? Maybe you just have your own opinions about this, perspectives, some things I didn't touch on at all that you picked up on. Let me know. Put all that stuff down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though. Blah, blah. I don't know what I was going to say. 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the live stream. Usually lasts around 2 hours, although we have an extra song. Usually we do 10 tracks, and we're doing 11 tomorrow. So it's probably going to go for about 2.5 hours. We just listen to music, chill, chat, hang out. Very low stakes, low stress. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. It's a chill environment. If you just want to listen to some cool music, come by, check it out. Otherwise, though, Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. We'll start next week's theme. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.